What's up, everyone? My name is David, and for my college senior thesis, I decided to do a video project highlighting people's personal experience with racism. According to Oxford Languages, racism can be categorized and described as prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people of color on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. Textbook definition alone, a lot of people might know what racism is, but when it comes to the actual experiences that people from the BIPOC community experience, they probably do not know what racism can look like. So the purpose of this video is just to showcase 3 people that I interviewed on Zoom, their traumatic racial and racism events that they've experienced throughout their life and continue to because of the basis of their skin color, and just to educate people after that want to learn more about racism and that are learning about racism for the first time. So in a bit, you're going to see those interviews, and then after, we're going to do a little debrief on that. So let's get right into it. All right, I'll put that now. All right, sweet. It's recording.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and do that. So if you don't mind just introducing yourself, like name, age, where you live, and then I can ask you the questions from there.
All right, I'm Marvin Smith. I am 24. I turn 25 in like 10 days, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts. So,
Nice. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Travis Trotman. I'm 25 years old, and I currently live in Barbados. If you are viewing this, you probably know me as the Fulton Hall director from last year.
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm from Norwich, Connecticut, and yeah.
So, cool. My first question I want to ask you is, what was your first experience with racism?
Honestly, because you're a little kid, you're not thinking about this stuff back then, but it definitely had to be in elementary school when kids are you always got the jokes of black people eat fried chicken and watermelon, or the one that actually hurt me a lot, but I'm a little kid, I'm just trying to roll with the punches, was black kids don't have dads. That's something you always heard other kids saying. It's just you're black, you don't have a dad. It doesn't make sense. He's you're black, you obviously like this, you obviously like that. You're gonna be this way and that way. But you're a little kid and you're just all right, cool, these are just jokes. But the jokes are where did these come from? Why do people think these things? So definitely elementary school. Definitely in the first, second grades, bro, when kids are clowning, but it's racially charged.
My first experience that I actually wrote down as racism was my freshman year of college. I grew up in Barbados. So a little backstory, I grew up in Barbados, born and raised there. The majority population are Black people. In the US, you call them African American, but here we just call Black people. And so coming to the US, I became a minority, and going on my floor, I was the minority. There was no other persons of color on my floor. And so my first experience of racism, there was this white student on my floor who would play video games, and he'd be very loud in the lounge, and he always kept saying the N-word. He wasn't talking to me, but he just kept saying it, and it wasn't a word that I said. I know some Black people say it, but just me personally, I don't say it. And he kept saying it, and it really annoyed me because from my knowledge and from what I was taught and from what I knew growing up, that was a word for Black people. That was not a word for any other race to use. It was for Black people. And he kept saying it so much that it really annoyed me. So I reached out to my resident advisor. I asked him, hey, this guy is saying this word. I don't like it. I don't think he should be saying it. Listed down all the historical reasons why. And my RA's response was to go to the lounge and just tell the guy, hey, you're too loud. Not to stop saying this word, not giving him the reasons to why you shouldn't say this word. It was, hey, you're too loud. And so freshman me was thinking, is that it? Is that all you're gonna do? And I was kind of scared to go to administration, to go to student life about it. So I did nothing. And it just continued, it continued until one day I broke. I left my room and I went out there, shouted at him and told him every reason why he shouldn't be saying this word, where it came from, the origins of it, everything. And that was when he stopped. He stopped until the spring. And then it just continued, but it was one of these things where it wasn't directly toward me, but it was this person grew up in a household where him and his family said this word and it was fine. And I didn't want to come to all of these different conclusions about it because I didn't know, but I assumed that if he's saying this in his household and it's fine, they're probably using toward other people of color in a derogatory way. And that is what annoyed me, that it was so easy for him to use this word and even for my RA to confront him about it. And from that moment moving forward, I knew that my experience in this college would be one where I'm fighting for myself, or other people of color, we're the ones that are going to be fighting for us, because the students, leaders at that time weren't doing it.
And so we used to live in Naugatuck, Connecticut, which is probably about like 2 hours away from where I live now. Naugatuck is fairly white. There's not a lot of like people of color there. And so one day my family was like just walking with me and my brother down the street, and a van like pulled up next to them and called them the N-words, and then just sped away. And so like that's my first experience. I don't remember because I was very, very, very young. I think I was like probably like a year old. But I think the first memory I've ever had with racism was when I moved to Connecticut from Georgia. And I like just moved to Connecticut, and it's again like a predominantly white area. And like somebody, like a person, like a child, like I think we were like 8 years old, and they blatantly called me like the N-word to my face multiple times. And so like people would like call me like a monkey or whatever, and like we were like young, like very, very young. And so yeah, kind of a lot of like in my young years I had a lot of it, like middle school, even not so much in high school because I went to a more diverse school, but so much in like the area that I grew up when I was younger. A lot of racist things were said, not just by children but also by some adults as well.
And if you don't mind just elaborating more, like how did that make you feel?
The first time I heard it, it was kind of like, I need a rewind. I don't think he said that. He probably said something else. And so I myself was questioning it. I'm like, no. You hear these things, but it's not gonna happen. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, because he just said it, it was almost like the word apple to him, or the word and. He used the word and so much in conversations, it just came off his tongue like honey. And it was just like, I had to double back. I'm like, this is not real, but it was. And every time he said it, it was almost as though I was in, say, it's a bad example, but I was in the ground and like someone just kept pouring like a pound of sand on me. It was just getting hard on my chest. And that time when I broke was, this is for me. This is for all my brothers of color. This is for all my sisters of color. I'm going to shut you up. I'm not just going to shut you up and stop. I'm going to shut you up and educate you at the same time. And it was exhausting because after it was finished and I walked away, I was like, he probably didn't even hear a word I said, but I felt a little freer because I got it off my chest. This is what I had to say.
Honestly, it hurt, bro. Like especially like the not having a dad, like it hurt because it's just like, all right, like I'm a black kid, like I was born black. This is how I am, and like you already have an idea of me. So then it comes down to, do I live up to your idea, or am I gonna sit there and be like, all right, the stereotypes is wrong. Like it's racist. What you're saying is wrong. Of course, like I got caught up in it. You know, stereotypes are fucking terrifying, man. Like I really was just like, yeah, I love fried chicken and watermelon. Like I don't even really like watermelon. It's just, but like you want to fit in. Like you want to hang out with everybody. You want to deal with all that stuff. So like you just shove it deep down, and you're just like, all right, I'm okay with this level of racism, which then just kind of like opens up a whole Pandora's box of the world. So
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely like little kids are ruthless.
Bro.
And like obviously like those are things that they don't just find out and they don't like, like just come up with. Those are things that they learn at home, and from other people that think just like them. So like that's, and I remember the Young Achievers like going to that. Like, yeah, I remember.
Bro, yeah, some wild stuff was said, even down to like teachers. Like teachers already had like the preconceptions of us, because it's like we went to school in like Jamaica Plain. That's where it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of our teachers were like white women. Like they already had an idea of what we were, and they had their own ideas of what we were. Like I don't know if you remember, there was a kid that we went to school with. His name was Cedric.
Oh, I
You
do remember.
Cedric?
Yeah.
They were always like, Cedric was a problem student. Like and that's how they automatically marked him. Dude just had ADHD. You know what I mean? He was just hyperactive. But like they put him in the box like he's a bad student. So I'm gonna treat him like he's a bad student. And I remember like he was some teacher he was like roasting or something. And she's just like, you're a thug. He's in 3rd grade. How's he a thug? He's a 3rd grader. Like, is it that serious?
At first, like, I didn't know what to think of it because I think I would just, because since I was very young and being exposed to that, I kind of just thought it was the norm, especially because as much as my parents tried to teach me about racism, because it was such a natural occurrence at my school, I just sort of became like desensitized to it and normalized it in my life. And so it kind of almost felt like Stockholm syndrome, where it's like these people are literally abusing me, but I still want to appeal to them and, like love them and be compassionate towards them and still gain their acceptance. And so it kind of affected me in the way of like, at first it affected me a lot. And then I sort of just had to just get through it because living in like Connecticut, especially the Northeast, it's very white, and like we weren't going to get up and move to a different town because like we didn't have the financial resources to do so. So I sort of felt like I just had to suck it up and like keep going with it until I just like got out and went to a more diverse school. So I think it was just me getting hit with it at first, but then realizing that this is just something that I'm ultimately going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. And that I'm just going to have to become more, not normalized to it, but back then I just realized I had to just like succumb my feelings and just not be so like vigilant about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like code switching in a way, right? You had to learn how to not only code switch, but also like assimilate. So you had to like...
I remember that. Damn. It was like all those microaggressions and gaslighting. They did not...
Yeah, and I mean, it was just our environment. So like that's what we thought was normal, because I mean that's what they were teaching us. It's like, yeah, this is normal, like it's cool, like this is how kids act. But like, do they have to act like that? Can't we like teach them, hey, maybe that's not okay? You can be whatever you want to be and like actually mean it when you say it. Like stereotypes, they exist because of this. It's not just a stereotype; it's racist.
But from that, how did you change because of that one experience that you just talked about, if you did?
I changed a lot. My friend group changed, I will say. I think when I went to college, my friend group were the international students because I came in as an international student. So my friend group was the international students, and majority of us were Black, but all of our experiences were different. We all came from countries where we were the majority race. So may that be Hispanic, Latino, Black, Asian. We were all the majority, and we came in as minorities. But the Black international students, all of our experiences, like we watch the news, we have parents who tell us about what happens in the US to a lot of people of color. So we were more on alert about these things and not so much the other races of international students. Not saying they didn't care, it's just more of this has been on our radar from the moment we were born type thing. And so how I changed was I started having more Black African-American friends on campus. I reached out to a few people. I had a cousin on campus at the time, and she was working at the school, and she was an African-American, went to the school. So I reached out to her and she got me connected with other African Americans on campus. And just more as it became like a safe community for me, but also a place where we would go and vent and kind of talk and then go with plans to administration of like, these are things that are happening and we want you guys to care about them as much as you care about our white students, help us out. And so that's one way I changed. I also changed in my leadership. From my freshman year, I wanted to become an RA. That didn't happen. Totally fine. But then I got nominated to be in our Black Heritage Club, so I did that. And so kind of changing my scope of how can I go from just being a student to being a student leader, a student advocate, advocate for my own self, but also advocating for other students to come after me as well.
I definitely changed. I believe that I changed because I'd usually, if somebody said something, like even like the slightest thing that might have been like a microaggression, I would like sweep it on the rug, be like, okay, like this is normal. But then like sort of growing up and then like being more put into environments where like people actively, like Black people actively spoke out against it, I felt more comfortable to speak out against it. Because like growing up in a predominantly white school, a lot of the kids that I went to school with were like rednecks and like they love their camo and like they would totally be Trump supporters. They are Trump supporters, but basically I felt outnumbered. Like if I spoke up, I was scared for my own life that something could happen to me, because I was like the only Black kid at my school at some points, and like there were only probably like a couple other Black kids at my school. But going to like a more diverse school in high school, a lot of other Black kids like stood up against racism that they were facing at school. And so that sort of empowered me to be like, well, I don't really have to be silent about it anymore. Like I can, you know, still speak on my experience and hold people accountable without the fear of being hurt. Because like that did happen, like when I went to the principal and I said, hey, like this dude called me the N-word to my face, there were no repercussions for him, because it was my word against his, and like a Black girl against a white man, who's gonna win in that situation, we all always know. And so now being in a place where there's so many people who have empowered me and made me feel more comfortable to speak up against racism, I think that's what really made me change my perspective in not normalizing racism, but actively speaking out against it rather than holding it in, and letting it slide for other people.
I learned very early on, because like, you know, I've always been like a relatively large person, but like I learned relatively early on that people will always be afraid of me just off my appearance. And that was just like, you either roll with those punches or you end up in a situation you don't want to be in. So honestly, from like elementary school into like when I went to Latin Academy, like I was just like, yeah, no, like racism, I'm not giving that too much thought. Like I'm not gonna give my time and energy into that, because like no one wants to think about those bad things. You want to enjoy your time and everything. But like it turned into a situation like I'd go to school and I'd be like one of the biggest kids, and there'd be comments like one time a girl told me that she was afraid of Black men because they look terrifying. So they look big and scary. And like, bro, I was like, so what does that mean? Like, she's like, oh no, like you just look intimidating. I was like, so, but like, why do you think I'm intimidating? Because, like there's a kid named Jason, he's like my height, a little shorter. Everyone loved him. They're like, oh, he looks like a puppy. But I'm intimidating, I'm scary, I'm terrified. So I had to learn how to adapt, because if I'm intimidating and something goes wrong, I'm automatically in trouble. So I had to be sure, like, people think I'm goofy, people think I'm this, people think I'm that, and I genuinely am a goofy, nice person. I don't like violence. I don't really like, you know, I like chilling with people. I like giving good vibes. It's how I am as a person. But like when you see me and you see me down the street and I just have a straight dead face, it's just like, hey, he looks kind of mad. Or, oh, he looks kind of scary. He's intimidating. Like, look how big he is. He's so large and da-da. And then it's just kind of like, okay. And then on the other end, if they're not intimidated by me, it's just kind of the whole, why aren't you playing football, or why aren't you playing basketball? And I was like, I can do other things, and I refuse to let you put me in that box. So it really came down to like, it was code switching. That's when I first learned how to code switch. And it's super sad because, like, depending on who I was around, I acted a certain way just to avoid any unnecessary trouble, if I could. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think I learned how to code switch like straight out of Young Achievers right into like 7th grade, because like, I mean, not for nothing, Latin Academy is an exam school, but like a lot of people had, you know, like they're just like, oh, it's still Roxbury, like you're still a hood kid, like you're not Latin school. So like even when I got to that point, even when I went to an exam school, even when I was doing all the work, people were just kind of like, well, you know, you're still this. And I was like, all right, cool. So when does the, you know, when does the views change? Like when do I get looked at and someone says like, oh, I don't know anything about that person, but I would like to? It'd be cool, you know?
What advice would you tell someone that is learning about racism for the first time? And that could mean for other people of color, that can mean people that benefit from racism. You can take either or perspective on that.
I think to speak to white people, I think when they learn about racism, I kind of had this conversation with somebody the other day, because I see it a lot, and I saw it a lot at Gordon when like the hate crimes were happening, and the white people were like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, what is this earth? Like, what is happening? And for people of color, we're like, this is our life. Like, you're stepping into our experience now, and you're learning about what we're going through every day. And so I think my advice to white people as they're learning about racism is not to feel like, what is the world and like, what is this coming to, but like sort of accept the fact that this has been happening. Like, this isn't new. This isn't something that just like sparked in May just because of George Floyd. Like, this has been something that has been happening since the first slave trade, even before that, when the Native Americans were here. Like, it's been happening for so long, and becoming aware about it doesn't mean that you should be like so angry at the world that you don't know why the world is the way that it is. Just keep learning about why it is the way that it is. And don't ask people of color, like, why does this happen to you? Like, I don't know. Don't ask me that. Like, just refrain from asking people of color, just like, why does this happen to you? Why is this happening in the world? Because like, even I'm still trying to like figure that out, because people can use the blanket answer that is like, oh yeah, racism, that's why this happens. But it goes deeper than just hating somebody that's different than you. It goes deeper than that. So like, even I'm still trying to navigate that answer. So asking me sort of a stupid question like that is like, well, I don't know. You don't know. We're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So just like, when you're educating yourself on racism, before you approach your friends of color, make sure you try to understand their point of view, because you're coming at it from a fresh perspective, but we're coming at it from years and years and years of experience. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to ask a question that is going to sort of be, it's going to sort of be sensitive to their subject. Like, you don't want to like ask them a question that's going to like become more apprehensive towards you and not make you want to approach them about questions about race. But just educate yourself on like different topics. And then when you have questions, ask them if you can ask a question about race. Do not just say, hey, da 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 da. Like, you need to preface it, because sometimes we might be still going through our like racial trauma, and it might be hitting us really hard that day. And you just need to preface that, hey, can I ask you a question about race? And if we say no, be okay with that. Like, don't try to push harder. Don't try to like go further. You need to understand your limits and your boundaries, because some of us are still going through years and years of racial trauma that we're trying to heal from. And it's a continual process, and some days are harder than others. So you need to really realize that like this is not your experience. This is not something that has happened to you, but this is something that's happening to us. And when you're stepping into that experience with another person, you should not be trying to make it seem like it's your problem, because it's
a lot of people of color experience racism in some way. We don't always acknowledge it as racism because I think we want to keep ourselves sane a little bit. So we kind of put it into the different pockets of, oh, that's microaggression, or that person's just not smart, or that person, like we kind of pocket things a little bit so our mind space is a little bit better. But I think my advice to white people is when a person of color friend comes to you, or if you're in an RA or you're in a leadership role and a person of color comes to you and says this happens to them, instead of questioning it, or instead of saying, oh, that never happened to me, actually listen to that person. Listen to understand. You're not going to exactly feel how they feel because your skin color is different, but listen to that person and try to understand it. And your only questions should be questions that kind of affirm, questions that help you better understand the experience that they just went through. Because when people come with the approach, white people come with the approach of, oh, that didn't happen, or are you sure? Like, are you sure? That thing boils my blood. When people are like, are you sure? Like, yes, I am sure exactly what just happened to me. And like, for instance, I'll give a story. When I was at Gordon, I was walking through Lane, and a person came up to me and they said, oh my gosh, great job on the basketball game. And I turned around, this person worked at Gordon and I worked at Gordon, and I said, nope, not a basketballer. I work here, I'm a resident director. And this person was someone that I had a few meetings with over the last few months. So you would think this person would know me. And so when I went to another colleague and told them like, yeah, this happened, their first question was like, are you sure? You sure that person mistook you for that? And my response was, you think I made up a story to come in here to tell you that I made up a story about this? And then that's kind of when they took a second, apologized. So I'm thankful that they apologized, and then was a little bit more accepting to hear more about the experience. And that person who mistook me wrapped back around, apologized, sent an email, all these different things. And it wasn't a quick like, oh, I forgive you. It still took time. But at the same time, it was more of this process. So my advice again to white people is when someone comes to you first, that means they trust you to some degree. Listen to them, try to understand, and then also know the resources that you can help that person move to the next step, to find healing, to find their strength again, to move forward, not move on, but to move forward.
I think what it really comes down to, even just like someone who even knows about racism or like is in their learning process of it, is be prepared to unlearn and listen. Because even in the realm of racism, POCs and Black people still, like, our voices get swept under the rug for like a white activist or someone who's like, let me stand at the forefront and tell you what I think about racism. And it's like, Black people, and the reality is like Black people POCs, like, yeah, we'll do our part and we'll talk about it. But like, even in spaces like my job, I will not name it just in case they but in this space, I would never, ever, ever, ever talk about racism to any of these people, just because I've seen it blow back and people get fired. I've seen people get like silenced. I've seen people just like their whole job explode. I've seen people, because someone who will say, I'm not racist, and then you tell them this tendency you do is racist, they get really offended and they get defensive, and they'll sit there and tell you that they're not. But how are you telling the oppressed what is or isn't racism? I know how I was made to feel. And you're choosing not to listen. You're choosing to be like, I understand it on my terms. But in those terms, I mean, you're a white person. You benefit from the system. This whole entire country was built for you. Period. Every single aspect of it was built for you. It was made for you. It was made to benefit you. We were brought here as property. We were brought here to work. We were brought here to do things that you didn't want to do. Then you decided, all right, maybe they're people. And then went and still taught your kids we were animals. the police, they were called the slave catching unit and was changed to the police. And I'm supposed to go trust a group that was originally called the slave catching unit. It's like, if they took a step back, just really took a step back, listened and unlearned. And it's a lifetime. It's gonna take forever because it's ingrained. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people just need to they just listen to the person of color around you. See how they're feeling in an environment. Because this place isn't home to us. It's someplace we were brought, we were taken, sold, whatever, and now we're here. And we're still fighting for a spot. How many more people I gotta see die just because they're Hispanic, Black, Asian? Just because you feel like we're not the same. I still bleed, you still bleed. And I think people really forget that. And it's just, I don't know, man. Like, I deal with racism comments every single day. Like, that's how I started my day. There's some comment about, like, you know, neighborhoods in Boston, or, oh, that person looks kind of scary, or whichever comment. And they think it's like, oh no, like, I'm liberal, I'm woke, I'm like aware. And just like, you don't realize what you're saying is really fucked up. Like, really fucked up. Like, take a step back and be like, oh shit, maybe I should realize why this isn't okay. So, like, yeah, I'd honestly just say, like, if people take a step back and, like, you have to want to change everything. You can't just pick and choose the parts of racism you don't fuck with. Like, you can't be like, oh, like, you know, I don't like that. Or just like, it's like, yeah, okay, but it's wrong, and you have to see why it's wrong. And once you can do that, you can unlearn that one thing. But that's not it. You're not just like, oh, I'm woke now. I still have a lot that I personally, as a Black man, have to deal with and unlearn in my own aspects. Just dealing with, like, patriarchy and just, like, hypermasculinity and all those things. And I understand that. So the same thing can be done with white people and racism. Take that step and understand that you're going to be unlearning stuff for life. And if someone can show me that they're really willing to do that, yeah, I have an open dialogue. I love talking to people about these things because it's important. And because I have to live with it forever, so you sure as hell gonna hear me talk about it. I promise you, I'm gonna tell you about racism every single chance you get, as long as it doesn't put me in danger or get me fired, because it's already hard enough, you know, surviving. So that's it on that front.
Yeah.
So here we are. We've come full circle. We've heard the stories of my close friends that have experienced racism, and you learned a little bit about how racism can look like. Moving forward, I hope this, opens up more opportunities for you to speak out on racist things that happen around you, because if we don't speak up on the things that happen around us, nothing will be done. And so continue to call out people on their racist actions, continue to be more vocal about things that are not good, and help out the people and those close friends of yours that represent themselves as the BIPOC community. Because we need more people to be able to look at these things as, that was really racist. Look at these things and tell these people and confront them, that was really wrong of you for you to say that and do that to me, and just to call them out. People can get really comfortable with the things that they do if they're not told from the beginning that what they're doing is wrong. So I hope this helps. Thank you again for watching, and thank you for my friends that have been able to be vulnerable in their experiences, to talk about it on camera or Zoom, and just to, be open with the things that they have experienced, even though they are incredibly traumatic. So I hope this helps, and moving forward, I hope that you too would do the same thing on calling out these people. So thank you for watching. Okay. That's it.